Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's Wednesday, September 10th, and this is our 12th EPIP webinar of 2014, Talent-Focused Grant-Making, Fund the People for Impact and Sustainability. I'm your EPIP host for this afternoon's festivities, Michael Barham, and we're joined by three fantastic panelists, Rusty Stahl, Tom Fuechtmann, and Stephanie Andrews. We're going to be getting started shortly, but before we do, I'd like to tell all of you a little bit about EPIP, about who we are, and what we do. So, Emerging Practitioners in Philanthropy, EPIP for short, is a national network of foundation professionals and social entrepreneurs who strive for excellence in the practice of philanthropy. We're also an inclusive group of highly skilled and effective change makers committed to working together to build a just, equitable, and sustainable society. So you're probably wondering, what does that mean? What do you do? So we provide a platform for our community to do a few things: connect with each other, learn and practice leadership skills, and voice emerging transformative thoughts in the social sector. And hopefully today with this webinar we're going to be doing a bit of everything. We're happy to have all of you joining, and you know, we're excited to move forward. For those of you who are not EPIP members, now is as good a time as ever to join. We have plenty of webinars on tap for the rest of the fall and winter of 2014. We have national events, we have local events, and a lot of exciting things going on, and we're really just a community of smart, really engaged social sector folks. So we're excited, and we definitely invite you to join, and contact me, Michael, at epip.org for more information on that. A couple of other announcements and upcoming events. Our EPIP People of Color Network Gathering is taking place at the Facing Race Conference November 13th through 15th. That's in Dallas, Texas. The PCN offers participants access to professional development training, intergenerational learning opportunities with the intent of diversifying and retaining people of color within the sector. It's a fantastic event. If you haven't had a chance to learn more about Race Forward and the Facing Race Conference, it's also going to be a really exciting event. So check that out. Our next webinar coming up on September 24th, also at 3 p.m. Eastern, Intent to Discriminate Not Required, Understanding a Structural Racism Lens. Certainly very pertinent, especially with the events recently in Ferguson. So we're excited to talk more about that. And as always, you can check out our website, epip.org/events, for national events, webinars, and plenty of local events hopefully taking place near you. So before we get started, just a few important items for housekeeping. Those of you calling on the phone, please make sure to mute your computer. Want to make sure to avoid echo. All attendees will be on mute during the presentation. If you have technical difficulties, please use the question box. We'll be monitoring that throughout. We'll also save some time for Q&A, so please type your questions in during the webinar, or we're going to try something new, and we're going to enable the hand raising feature. So when we get to the Q&A, about the last 15 minutes, please raise your hand. We'll actually unmute you, and hopefully it'll allow us to hear a little from you, and you can share your questions with the group. So two different options to ask questions, and we will be recording this webinar, so please make sure to visit our website if you have to jump off early. It'll be up there probably by early next week, and there's a post-webinar survey. Please make sure to fill that out. We always like to hear and learn more about what we can do to improve these webinars. So we're going to get started momentarily. Just let me tell you a little bit more about today's panelists. Some of you, those familiar with EPIP, are probably familiar with Rusty Stahl. He's our president he's the president and CEO of the Talent Philanthropy Project. It's a new national initiative to advance the social sector by increasing investments in nonprofit professionals. But during 2002 to 2012, Rusty Stahl served as the executive director of Emerging Practitioners in Philanthropy, EPIP, and he was with us for a very long time. Grateful for all the work he did. Those of you who are not familiar with Tom Fuechtmann, he's a program officer of Community Memorial Foundation. He served as a program officer with CMF since 2001, and in that time, he's directed two of the foundation's primary strategic initiatives, the Youth Initiative aimed at improving health among people aged 6 to 18, and more recently, the Building Organizational Effectiveness Initiative aimed at building the organizational capacity of CMF's grantees. And last, certainly not least, Stephanie Andrews is the Leadership Development Director at Bush Foundation. As a Leadership Development Director there, she leads human capital strategy for the foundation, providing strategic direction, coaching, and training to foundation staff. She also works closely with the leadership team and the Bush Fellowship Program to grow leadership capacity across the region. So those are our esteemed panelists. I'm excited to pass it over to them, but before we do, we'd actually like to hear and learn just a little bit about what you all are doing and how engaged your organization is on the issue of nonprofit talent development. And I'm actually going to share a poll with the audience, and I'd like to hear very quickly just where your organization is. So I'm launching the poll now. Please look out, and we'll give you all about 30 seconds to complete that. All right, I see about 80% of folks have voted, so I'm going to close the poll and share those results. And everyone can get a quick look. It looks like 47% shared that it is a priority, 41% it's under consideration, and 12% not quite there yet. Hopefully we can help get you there today. So without further ado, I'm actually going to pass the baton over to Rusty Stahl and let him get started with the rest of today's presentation.
Greetings, everyone. Thanks so much for being on. Can everyone hear me? Okay, Michael, am I on? Well, he's muted now. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm really excited to be joined by all of you. I'm going to do three things in my presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Talent Philanthropy Project. Going to try to help us redefine the nonprofit talent challenge facing the sector, and finally talk about why that challenge presents a great opportunity for funders and nonprofits to take action. So first, a little bit about Talent Philanthropy Project. I should say that this is something that has evolved out of the work of EPIP and has been inspired by many, many folks in the field, including Grantmakers for Effective Organizations and other groups around the field. So what is it? It's a campaign to increase funder investment in nonprofit talent, which is currently at about 1% of grant dollars, and we want to get it up to about 5% of grant dollars by 2020. Why? Because we believe people are the primary asset for nonprofit effectiveness and social change. We're producing research, tools, and education opportunities to drive this campaign. And I'm on staff. We have some consultants, and we're developing an advisory board. And we're fiscally sponsored at a place called Community Partners, which is in LA, but working across the country. and with support from Kresge, Packard, and Annie Casey Foundation. So that's a little bit about the project. Two, what do we think the challenge is? So in the current discourse for about the last decade or more, the discourse about the field has really focused on a leadership deficit crisis. The idea that the baby boomers are the largest segment of our society statistically, and that when baby boomer nonprofit executives retired, which was predicted over the last 10 years to happen and sort of hasn't been happening at the rate that was expected, but when it happens, there will not be enough Gen Xers or others to sort of fill their seats. So sort of a glass half empty notion, and that this was going to result in this big crisis with a big gap in leadership. I'd like to reframe that for the conversation and the way we think about the field with a new view that's really asset-based, that looks at the glass as half full. Rather than overlooking all the people on this webinar, all the people in EPIP, all the people out there working hard as volunteers and professionals in nonprofit careers, I like to think of all of those millions of people as major assets for driving change. And I actually think there's many, many more millions of people who would love to join us in this kind of work if they knew how and if the sector did a better job of recruitment and retention. So I see this as a major opportunity. It is not a demography is destiny natural crisis. It's actually a human-made crisis. The deficit is not a deficit of people. It's a deficit of investment in our people. And so it's an opportunity to address the issue of recruitment, of development, retention, and retirement. And nonprofits and their boards have a major role to play, and funders do as well. Hence the notion on this webinar of talent-focused grant making. This is both a practical and a moral responsibility, I think, for us as a funding community. So I'm going to give you an analogy, a new way to think about how the nonprofit sector works. Let's think of it as a forest ecosystem, each tree being a separate nonprofit organization. Funders often sort of think of themselves like the sunshine looking down on the forest ceiling and are most concerned about the fruits and the leaves, the outputs and the outcomes of organizations. And let's, to continue the analogy, think of the branches of the trees as the programs that carry and produce these fruits and leaves. That's most of what most foundations fund, is programs. Now, some funders have started in the last 10 to 20 years really thinking about the trunk, the capacity that holds up all the programs. And that's sort of where we are as a community. But underground, unseen by from above, is the root system, which I think of as the talent system, which holds up the trunk. Without a strong root system, the trunk falls over, the branches break, and there are no more leaves or fruits. And so under this root system is the thing which nurtures the roots and feeds the tree, which is the talent pool, or the water table. And you'll see in this image, it's actually not a stagnant pool, but a rushing stream, because talent is moving faster and faster in our economy and our society. People are not staying in one tree or one organization. They're moving around a lot. Careers are not all in one organization. So rather than just looking from the forest, from above on the forest ceiling and thinking about outcomes and branches, talent-focused grant making thinks about that water table, what's below ground that's nurturing the tree. How do we nurture it from the bottom up as well as the top down? So the moral of the story is, if you want to harvest fruit, you've got to nourish the roots. Okay, so now let's think about, if that's the case, if we're going to take that as the case, let's think about what the demand for this kind of talent investment is from nonprofits and what the supply is from funders. I'm going to give you two stats that show you that indicate the level of demand for this, whether you see it or not from your grantees or hear about it from them. And I have theories about why you may not be hearing about it, but there is a demand out there. First, 73% of nonprofit executives say they lack sufficient resources to develop their own leadership skills and that their funders don't understand this challenge. That stat is from the Center for Effective Philanthropy. And the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network has shown that 90% of emerging nonprofit leaders cite burnout as a likely reason for leaving the sector altogether, followed by low salary, lack of career development, and job-related stress. So these two stats indicate the high need for investing in people both at the top of organizations and in the middle and at the bottoms. Okay, so let's think about now, what's the supply of talent investing? Well, unfortunately, it's quite rare. In research that I did with the Foundation Center, I looked at 20 years of data from 92 to 2011 from the top 1,000 largest US foundations. The red line on your screen shows total grant-making output from those 1,000 foundations in dollars. The green line that you can barely see right above the zero line is the amount of talent investing as a part of that overall money. So you can see it averages about 1% of total grant-making dollars over a 20-year period. And in the last 10 years, it's dipped below, consistently below that 1% to about 0.8% in 2010. So all of this you can see from the new framework and the demand and the lack of supply, there's an opportunity for you and for all of us in EPIP and as a funding community to take some action. Now we define talent philanthropy as advancing nonprofit impact and sustainability by intentionally investing in nonprofit talent. That that investment can come from within a nonprofit and its board and staff, or from their funder. And often funders have an oversized influence on how this plays out. So a little bit of this is sort of a logic model that shows if you invest in people, program work and services that are used by the community improve, which leads to better impact and outcomes, and thus a better ability to raise dollars and resources, which you can then feed back into investing in your people. And there's great literature in the business world to show that this works in businesses. I think we ought to adapt it to the nonprofit sector. Talent investing is not just leadership development, but I think it's all of these wedges of the pie here, everything from organizational culture to professional development to systems like personnel policies. I'm running low on time, so I'm just moving along quickly here.
Rusty,
Yeah.
Rusty, I'm sorry to interrupt. It looks like your screen has disappeared. It appears to be a quick technical difficulty, so I think
Okay.
I'm just going to troubleshoot this very quickly and perhaps change the presenter and change that then back to you. If you would just give it one quick second. Thanks.
Sure.
Sorry about this, folks.
Well, you know, I appreciate everybody's patience and appreciate the opportunity to be on this call. Take the moment to thank Rasan, who I know is on, for inviting this webinar, and Michael for all your work getting it together.
Thank you, Rusty, and we are. You should have the option to share your screen.
Okay. I did that.
Now I can view your slides. I am hoping that folks, if you can see Rusty's slides, please please chat us, because I know we heard from a few different folks that you couldn't. All right, looks like it's back. We're back up and running. Thanks,
Okay.
Rusty.
Thanks.
And we can get back to it. Sorry to interrupt, folks.
Okay. So just a few guiding principles, and there's more that I'm going to provide you in a web link. But talent investing can support not only your grantees and their staff, but also the community that benefits from those grantees and the foundation itself. So I suggest beginning with the foundation's goals and core grantees, not thinking of leadership development or talent investing as something outside the realm of your core grant making or your foundation's goals, but rather as something that can be integrated. In fact, and you'll see this under my third bullet here, that it can work across any type of grant making or funding model that you have. Whether you just fund programs, you only provide general operating support, or you do capacity building, I believe that talent investing can operate and be useful across all three of those types of philanthropy. It is not a sub-point in capacity building, I don't believe. I think it's something that actually cuts across, or should cut across, all of our types of support that we lend to nonprofits. And finally, that it is important to consider issues of diversity and values in talent as you make those investments. Let's see. So some other things to consider as you think about talent interventions in the form of grant making or foundation programs. Consider the level at which you intervene. We often think of investing in talent as being something that's individualistic, and you'll hear some examples of that in the following two presenters. But also, there are ways to think about investing in teams, in whole staffs of organizations, in networks of nonprofits, indeed in whole cities full of, or other kinds of ecosystems. Think about the life cycle of organizations and of people. So for example, if you're making a grant to a startup run by 3 young people who are at the beginning of the career, they may need a different kind of talent investment than if you're investing in an organization that's mature, 100 years old, and is run by people who are closer to retirement. Then a whole different type of investment may be needed. So really customizing interventions to the places where people are and organizations are in their life cycles. And thirdly here, what's your delivery mechanism? Is it a program that your foundation will run and manage? Is it that you fund an intermediary to provide services to your grantees or others? Or is it in the form of direct grants, where grantees actually manage the activities? All three can be legitimate and have different pros and cons. So that's sort of a very quick summary, and I want to make sure you know that there are more resources where you can go into further depth on this sort of reframing about what talent philanthropy can look like, or talent-focused grant making. So at the end of the webinar, if you go to talentphilanthropy.org/plus, we've created a special page for you with resources on this framework, sort of conceptual resources, practical resources and tools that you can use in doing your own talent-focused grant making. And we'd love feedback on any of those because they're very new and sort of draft materials. And then third, some really good examples, including a set of case studies that EPIP produced that we'd love for you to link to and check out. So with that, I hope, despite the rush and the technical difficulty, this has made some kind of sense. And I'm going to turn it over next to Tom. Tom, are you, you there?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Fuechtmann. I'm a program officer with Community Memorial Foundation in Hinsdale. That's in the western suburbs of Chicago. Community Memorial Foundation is a private health conversion foundation. We were created in 1995 from the sale of a local community hospital. Our mission really is to improve health, the health of those who live and work in the western suburbs. And our vision is to work with the community to transform our region, the western suburbs of Chicago, into the healthiest region in the country. So it's a bold vision. Apologies to any other health foundations that are out there, but we're aiming to be the healthiest. We have about 92 million in assets, and we have only a universe of about 60 or 70 grantees. And with such a small grantee population and a very defined geographic area, right from our inception, our board has placed an emphasis on building the capacity of our grantee partners. And talent development has increasingly been a focus of ours in our capacity building initiative. Next slide. So I added this slide in part because I find it funny, but in part because I think it really says something about the way in which nonprofit organizations and even funders think about talent development and capacity building work. Especially after the economic downturn, nonprofits and funders really stopped funding talent development if they even ever were engaged in that kind of work. And you can see kind of from this graphic what happens. Everybody's interested in the new program or the sexy new initiative, but often neglects funding, as Rusty pointed out, any funding and any support for talent development and organizational capacity building. And when that happens, unfortunately, you know, an organization can only last for so long, and things that Rusty mentioned, like burnout and retention, become real issues when people aren't supported. So our foundation has really placed a great emphasis and a great focus on trying to build the foundation of nonprofits, not only through organizational infrastructure, grants, and those kinds of things, but also increasingly, as I mentioned, through really supporting talent development. Next slide, please. So this slide kind of echoes Rusty's schematic that he used about the forest, and this one is another model of like an iceberg. And you know, what we see as funders often is just the tip of the iceberg of what's really going on in an organization. We see programs, we see formal systems, we might see some symptoms of what's really going on in an organization, but how really do we address and provide support to the root causes, the practices, behaviors, attitudes, and really leadership that is driving what's going on in a lot of organizations? And what we have found is that, you know, through our capacity building work and our talent development support, that we really want to focus on leadership. And if our organizations are going to not just survive, but really thrive, it's going to be because of strong talent, strong leaders, not just at the top of the organization, but throughout the organization. And so that's where we have, you know, chosen to place some of our investments. Next slide. So some folks, I mean, it was interesting to see the poll that about 47% place talent development work as a priority, and 41% are kind of thinking about this, and then 12% it's not currently a priority. So this slide, I think I want to focus, you know, for all of you for whom talent development and capacity building work is under consideration, or for whom it's not yet a priority, maybe this slide can help. These are some reasons to invest in capacity building and also, I would say, talent development. And I should say that our board is really behind this in large part because we have seen an enhanced program impact, increased nonprofit and community sustainability, and this is a real way to leverage our philanthropic dollars. And there are lots of things that we do, which I'll get to in a minute, but I think it's important to kind of understand that if you're engaged in this work and want to be engaged in this work, it's really connected to the impact that you hope to have as a foundation. I mean, all of what we do, and in particular our capacity building work and our talent development work, ties back directly to what we're hoping to achieve in our vision and our mission. We can't have a healthy community without strong organizations. We can't have strong organizations without leaders and really talented people throughout those organizations. Next slide. So I just thought I'd talk a little bit about kind of, I mean, it's been a couple slides talking about why it's important. So here's what we do. We have, since our inception, done a lot of different things around capacity building and talent development. We've tried a lot of tactics across different roles within organizations, even across different, you know, groups in our community. And so some of the things that we do in our capacity building initiative, we provide organizational assessments to our grantees. We provide technical assistance grants, which we define as small grants up to $15,000 to hire a consultant to do a particularly capacity building task. We provide a lot of educational workshops, most recently around board development, kind of trying to build leadership at the top level of the organizational chart and in the board. The last three on this list really focus more around talent development. We have a relationship with an organization called the Management Association of Illinois that provides a whole range of HR support. And in one of Rusty's slides that unfortunately we didn't see too well in that minute when we lost connection, he talked a bit about kind of the various types of talent development opportunities that can exist. And one of them that isn't maybe as sexy but still really is really important is support for management and things like HR. And we have certainly found that this is a wonderful opportunity for line staff and others to learn about HR laws and how to develop their HR function. The next bullet there, the Ladder to Leadership program, we have launched last year a really extensive and intensive program facilitated by the Center for Creative Leadership called Ladder to Leadership. And it is a 16-month program that has executive coaching as part of it, has classroom work, and has an action learning component to it as well. It's really kind of a fellowship model that really takes emerging leaders, so program directors and development directors and the like, and essentially provides them with a lot of support so that they can have the skills of an executive director and kind of step into that role hopefully someday. So we're really excited. It is a very powerful way to kind of talk about talent development and skill development among emerging leaders. And the last program we do is a very robust executive coaching program. Our foundation pays for a year of executive coaching for executive directors and our grantees. That too has done a lot to reduce burnout, increase retention, and also in some more seasoned executives, talk very strategically about their legacy and moving toward retirement. So that's kind of what we do as a foundation around the capacity building and talent development work. I'm happy offline to talk with anybody about more about some of these specific programs that we fund. I leave you with a couple thoughts that kind of echo some of the closing thoughts that Rusty just shared with us. First and foremost, this really has to be connected to your vision and your mission as a foundation. All of this really we believe that it really drives our mission and our vision forward. And it's all connected. It's connected to what we try and do in our program work. And I think if we're going to talk about this, certainly if you're a foundation that has not engaged in this kind of work, you can really have some really transformative change with a small investment. Our executive coaching grants cost about $5,000 or $6,000, and that has had major impacts on the grantees and the organizations that have participated. So you can start small, but I would encourage you to commit for the long haul, because this talent development work is really important and critical if we're going to change the kind of make the big changes that we're all looking for with our grantee partners. So with that, I'll turn it over to Stephanie, who's going to share a little different model from the Bush Foundation.
Great, thank you, Tom. Tom has made a great case about the why of investing in talent, and so I'm going to talk a little more deeply about the focus on what we're doing. But I want to start out a little bit by filling you in a little bit about the Bush Foundation, in case you don't know. We're a private foundation based in St. Paul, Minnesota. You can go to the next slide. We say that we're not about beans, beer, or any connection to Texas. Our benefactor, Archie Bush, and his wife Edith founded the Bush Foundation in 1953 with dollars gained from his long career as one of the founders of the 3M Company. And so an early focus on innovation and also around developing leadership capacity in individuals. His very early interest, one of the primary legacy programs that is still at Bush, was around, he talked about providing a way for people of force and character, actually talked about men at that point in time, but men of force and character to leave their jobs for an extended period and to get to see the world from a different point of view, going usually across the country to some kind of degree program. That was 50 years ago, so the talent conversation goes a long way back at Bush. Just a little bit about our foundation and our funding focus. We talk about investing in great ideas and the people who power them as the shorthand to our work. We work in 3 states, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and then the 23 Native nations that share that same geography. The focus on pairing great ideas and the people that power them really goes back to what Tom was talking about just a minute ago, that we understand that really the great ideas, the great programs, the initiatives that we want to see make change in communities are only going to happen if we really also focus on the people. And in some respect, some of the focus of our work focuses on the people first, and then with the expectation that the work that they'll be doing in their communities really has greater impact and is more sustainable through the investment in their own leadership development. So just a quick overview of the 4 or 5 programs that we have at Bush. I'm going to come and talk about them all in a little more detail, but we have a fellowship program, which is a grants to individuals. This is our long-standing, again, the 50 years of investment in individuals through this program. It's paired right now with a program called the Leadership Network Grants, which is in its first year. We just made our first round of grants in this program, and those that has been about really trying to look at other organizations doing individual development and capacity building in the region and supporting them, so that doesn't all have to come through us. We're making grants to those organizations as well. The Ron McKinley Philanthropy Fellows is a partnership with the Council on Foundations and a new program that provides fellowships for individuals from communities that are currently underrepresented in foundation leadership. I'll talk more about that going forward here. Native Nation Rebuilder is a program with our Native Nations team that really looks to invest in Native leaders in their work to do nation building in their tribes. And then internal leadership development is a major focus here at Bush as well, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit too. So let's go down a level and talk about the Bush Fellowship Program. It is, at this point, with 50 years in, 2,200 people or so throughout the region that we funded in various ways through the fellowship program. It's really distinctive in how flexible it is. Many great leadership development programs out there, many of you probably work with or for or on some of them. The Bush Fellowship Program is pretty open in what it asks people to commit to and what we're looking for in selection. People can do an academic degree or self-designed learning program. We provide up to $100,000 for between 1 and 2 years to cover living expenses, supplies, equipment, travel, coaching, technical assistance, really whatever people tell us they need as a way to develop their leadership capacity is what we're willing to fund. Early on, as I had mentioned, Archie Bush's original view of the program was that people would leave their jobs. In the current iteration of the Bush Fellowship, that's up to the fellows' choice as well. So some of them leave their jobs for good, some of them take a sabbatical, some of them stay in their jobs and use the funding to do some work outside of employment to further their leadership growth. One of the things as well, I want to go and look at the Bush Fellows themselves. This next slide tells you better than I could say in words. Our current group of fellows, 24 of them selected from a group of pool of 400, so it's a very competitive program, and it's a very diverse group of people. You can see that from their faces, a bunch of people that range in age and have different racial backgrounds. You can't tell the range of issues they work on, so I just want to highlight a couple here. You know, in the top row we have Jackie, who's a successful social entrepreneur. She's developed a beer business that gives all of its profits back to the community. Down the row from her is Tane, who's an improv leader, a founder of a civic improv theater group here in the Twin Cities. We have a tribal elder from Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota who's working on peacemaking and how it applies to different leadership models. An attorney working on human trafficking issues, an architect working with neighborhood groups to make their housing more sustainable. Incredible range of issues that they work on, and as you can tell from probably what I'm saying, we're issue agnostic in terms of who we select for the Bush Fellowship Program, really looking to find extraordinary individuals who both have extraordinary achievement in back of them and extraordinary potential in front of them. We also then apply some of that same lens through a different program called the Native Nations Rebuilders program. And so one of the program focus at the foundation is around nation building, working with the elected officials in the 23 nations that share our geography. And those relationships, that program, it's tough, hard, 50-year, several generation work. we knew from the beginning of that work, it's about 5 to 6 years in at this point, we knew from the beginning that the way that work was going to go forward was also developing cohorts of leaders that could go into Indian country and continue to move that work forward. And so we're in year 5 of the Native Nation Rebuilders program. We select 20 to 30 people a year who go through a 2-year process that provides leadership programming and also networking possibilities for them to continue to build their leadership capacity and really to learn from each other. That program, as I said, we're in year 5 at this point, have seen Rebuilder graduates move on to be elected to tribal councils, tribal chiefs, and really exciting working across tribal lines to learn from each other. So that's a pretty amazing bunch of people to spend time with. We also then are looking at the inaugural class of the Ron McKinley Philanthropy Fellows, one of the other talent investments that we've been making at the Bush Foundation. This takes our longtime focus on leadership development and really brings it inside here to the foundation, focusing on developing a pipeline of diverse professionals that can one day then move into foundation leadership positions. So really trying to think about philanthropy as a sector and the work that we all need to do to have it look more like the communities that we're often serving. We worked with the Minnesota Council on Foundations to develop this program, and what happens through this program is that fellows are selected for 3-year appointments. Right now, the only site is the Bush Foundation. We're the inaugural site. This next year, we'll be having a couple more joining us. They get enhanced access to a lot of professional development, and then at the end of their fellowship, once they've acquired grant-making expertise, they also go on to get a lot of outplacement help from us as well. We're really excited to see what these philanthropy fellows will move forward. They are an amazing bunch of individuals, both individually and as a group, and so that is an exciting thing that we're looking forward to seeing how it progresses. Our final piece here then is bringing home what Rusty said at the very beginning too, is thinking about how do we bring some of that leadership lens and the people focus, the talent focus into the Bush Foundation. So we've made significant funds available internally for individuals and teams here at Bush for coaching and training. We have a pretty extensive professional development agenda for the foundation as a whole, really with the lens recognizing that the footprint that we have in our community is both about the work that we fund in the community and the people that we fund, and also the people that work for us and certainly after they leave the Bush Foundation as well. So we're excited about building a community of Bush Foundation alums that can continue to do our work as well, and it's an important part of our strategy. So that's the end of my slides. I think we're all really eager to hear questions that you might have.
Yes, thanks so much, Stephanie. Thanks so much, Tom and Rusty. I think it was really interesting to see different models and how you guys are really implementing this work. And as Stephanie said, I think we'd really love to hear some of your questions. I certainly have a few of my own, but I've talked plenty already. So I'm encouraging all of you in the audience, please raise your hand or just type your question into the question box, and we can share that with the group and kind of get a group discussion, a Q&A going. So I'll open that up for maybe 30 seconds or so. If not, definitely have a few questions here. And I'd love to learn some more. We talked about a lot of different really interesting aspects of this. And it doesn't look like any questions are coming in yet, folks. Don't be shy. Please share some. But I have a couple of questions of my own actually for you all. And one kind of builds on Rusty, what you discussed, that we talked about the outcomes and the fruits, right? And that's always kind of the primary focus. My question is, how do we measure the impact of talent development? Not only how do we know that it's working, but Tom, you mentioned that you've been able to see enhanced program impact. How do we know if it's having a positive impact on program work? So I'd love to hear from any of you. Can kind of just jump in and take that one.
Well, since Michael, you referenced something that I said, I'll
put you on the spot, Tom, didn't I?
Sure. So one of the programs we have is our Ladder to Leadership program that I referenced. We have 14 fellows who are all kind of in the middle management position at their organizations. They're engaged in a very intense 16-month program. And they all come from different organizations. They come from organizations that are doing very different things, and from across our geographic area. And truly, without the benefit of this program that they're engaged in, their bosses might know each other, but these fellows really didn't. And one of the outcomes that we have seen just in gathering people for a leadership development program and having them talk to each other and learn with each other is a really profound increase in information and referral sharing across our geographic area among these organizations, and in ways that you almost couldn't design. And so you gather a bunch of leaders together, and one of their tasks is to kind of work together on a team project on an issue that benefits our entire community. And even though the program isn't over yet and we don't have the benefit of those particular projects yet, we're already seeing an impact on kind of increased information and referral, increased connections between organizations, and ultimately better outcomes for clients that are being served. We also, through our executive coaching program, have seen a real decrease in burnout. We have people who have stayed in their positions as a result that they've self-disclosed that I would have left my job, and it would have been a great loss to the community had these executive directors left their positions. So focusing on kind of supporting leaders, and I mean leaders kind of throughout the organization, not just executive directors, but others, is really a powerful way to support not only the people themselves in the work that they're doing, and kind of keep them in your communities and keep them charged and energized and able to do the work that they're doing, but it also can really create connections between organizations as well. There are others, but I won't dominate the conversation. I'm sure Stephanie and Rusty have things to share as well.
This is Stephanie. Tom, that's so interesting, and I'm going to just pick up on that the one piece around networking, because it's really been a piece too, whereas we look at trying to measure the impact of our investment in people, we're both continuing to figure out how to do that and also trying to make as many points where that can happen as possible. We did an event called Bush Connect this last spring where we brought together 1,200 people who were our grantees and also other leadership development organizations, fellows together, and kind of watched it happen. We, at the event, had asked people to join a LinkedIn group and then watched the connections grow throughout the day. And it was an amazing thing to have this visual map, both through that LinkedIn map, but also through an app where you watched people exchange contacts and ideas, trying to find some ways to, if you are aware of Stephen Johnson's work about where good ideas come from and innovation, really how to create new adjacent possibles. And that's increasingly become the focus of how we think about measuring some of our work, is how are we bringing leaders together and investing in their capacity through the way that they're connecting with others. So that's kind of a cool way to understand the impact of some of this work.
This is Rusty. I have a couple of thoughts on this. There is some data coming out from foundations about the results. For example, there's a report called Creative Disruption, which looked at sabbatical funding from 5 different funders and analyzed the impact and showed things like the fact that 60% of survey respondents who were participants in these sabbaticals said their boards were more effective as a result of the planning and learning that surrounded the sabbatical process, and that the funders themselves benefited and got important returns from these offering these sabbaticals. They were able to build deeper, more trusting relationships with the leaders they fund, and they gained a deeper perspective on community needs. And they got better feedback from their grantees. So there were important outcomes. But one thing I want to say is that we put such a high bar on investing in talent. that we don't put on other things. And so this becomes, I think, a false barrier. If we ask the same question of, say, sending your child to college, or for us, many of us who are closer, just came out of college not that long ago, why did our parents send us to college? Was it because they could see the outcome of that college education the next year? Probably not. It was more of how we develop as humans, how we're going to learn how to think, how we're going to move forward over a longer span of ripple effects from having that college experience. So I don't know why, if each of us on this webinar thought a little bit about how we've been invested in and how we've benefited from that, and in turn what we've been able to do as a result, I'm sure we could come up with a lot of data about the value of those investments in us. And so I think we need to spin the question a little bit on its head.
That's a great answer, Rusty. And Stephanie and Tom, I think we at EPIP can certainly always get behind gathering folks and learning together. That's kind of what we value most highly. So those were great answers. We actually had a few other questions come in from the audience. Looks like there might be some overlap here, so I'm going to jump on one of the first questions from Linda Stout. Thanks, Linda. She says, as a board member of a national foundation, how do I educate the staff and board of the need to invest in this? I see the organization struggling and constant overturn of leaders, but we haven't made a commitment to this issue. And I see another question that's kind of similar, and I think that's something I'm wondering as well. How do you emphasize the importance of this? So I'd love to throw that out to any one of you three to kind of jump in there.
I'll start again. This is Tom from Community Memorial Foundation. I don't think I emphasized this point enough in my comments. For us, anyway, it began with listening to our grantees. And truly, everything we've done in our capacity building and talent development work has really started with listening. And I can't emphasize that enough. So if we're going to really have an impact as a foundation, it's going to ultimately be because of our nonprofit partners and our other key stakeholders in our community. I mean, we are not an operating foundation. We grant money and convene people and do other things too, but we don't operate our own programs. And so what we were seeing in the last couple years in particular was a lot of burnout, a lot of turnover at the executive director level, a lot of boards who really didn't kind of were struggling, I'll say, and also a lot of middle manager level staff who really were looking for opportunities to advance in their organizations, wanted to take leadership roles in the nonprofit sector in our communities, and we didn't want them to leave. I mean, the last thing we wanted were these bright, young, energetic, passionate, committed people who were, development directors and program directors to leave our community. And so all of that, we looked at as a staff and kind of presented to, after listening to our grantees, and presented that to our board and said, this is what's going on out there, and here's some ideas we have. And that's, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but ultimately it goes back to something that a couple of us have said on this call, that we really can't have the kind of impact we want to have as a foundation unless we're supporting people, because people are the ones that are going to drive the programs and drive the organizations and ultimately drive our mission forward.
Yeah, this is Stephanie from the Bush Foundation again, and I just can't, I'm nodding vigorously as Tom's talking, because I think that, that it's you're fooling yourself when you invest in a program, in an initiative, if you believe you're not investing in people. And you can do that indirectly or directly, but the reason, programs that we give grants to fail or succeed for a couple of reasons, sometimes because there are great leaders, and great staff, sometimes because the strategy is wrong, but you really can't even sometimes tell if the strategy is wrong if you aren't clear on the capacity of the people to deliver on it. And so as we listen to grantees too, and as we step back to look at why are things succeeding or failing, and how are we going to really increase our impact in communities as they're going to be, as demographics change and issues change, we realize that we need both that investment in people to make sure that our grant dollars are going to have the impact that we want them to have, and also that we need to be looking ahead not only for the strategic, programmatic answers, but how can we develop that pipeline before we need it? And that's, again, what continues to make us go deeper and deeper into the talent conversation.
If I can jump in here, it's Rusty. I think those are great responses. Linda, I'm so glad you asked that question, and I know you're a huge advocate around social justice work, just because I know you. And so I think one way to make the case is to say, in social justice organizing and in social justice work, developing leaders in communities is a huge important value in that work. And so for those of us who, for funders who are funding social justice groups, we ought to take that principle seriously inside the social justice organizations that we fund, not just in their external facing work, because there is sort of a hypocrisy or a contradiction going on in many nonprofits where they're trying to build a more just, equitable world outside in the community, but partly enabled by their funders who don't invest in these personnel policies and systems. They end up creating an unjust and unequitable system inside. So they're paying people well below what they deserve. They're not providing health benefits. They're not providing retirement savings. And so we end up treating our own, the community that's most committed to social justice in an unjust way. And so I think that's part of a case to be made in the context of foundations that fund social justice work. I also just want to say I think it's a mental mindset that we've inherited as funders about people are overhead, and we fund programs, we don't want people to be over dependent on us, et cetera, all these notions that I think are kind of outdated and need to be shifted. So it really is about educating people and shifting the mental model. And at Talent Philanthropy Project, we're really going to be trying to do that. So if we can be helpful, one of the tools that's up on the /plus website that I gave you is an article that lays out the whole talent philanthropy framework and tries to make a case. That may be an article, and I have a shorter version of it, if it's helpful, that you might want to circulate amongst board members and see if that's a starting place for a discussion. I'll turn it back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much for that impassioned answer, Rusty. Actually, it looks like we're just about out of time. It's 3:55, so unfortunately, we'd love to stay here. I'm sure the three of you could talk about this for many more hours, but don't think we have the time. So I just want to remind all attendees that the webinar recording and the slides will be made available on the EPIP website. Just go to programs, and you'll see the webinar program drop down. And I'd also like to remind you all to complete the evaluation. As I said earlier, we're always looking to improve our programs and our webinars. So love to hear from you. And lastly, I want to thank you all for joining us, and especially thanks to our panelists, Rusty, Tom, Stephanie. It was a pleasure hearing from each of you, learning from you, learning what you're doing to kind of support this work on the ground. So we're really appreciative, and hopefully we'll have you back some point in the future. Alrighty, folks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, folks. Have a great Wednesday afternoon.